21. I'm 79. My Amish husband told the church I was pregnant before he told me, Sarah's expecting by spring. I hear Bishop Miller say it behind me, plain as someone naming the weather, while the meeting house stove ticks and wet wool from 40 black coats fills the room. My fingers are inside my bonnet strings. I stop pulling. The ribbon goes tight against my throat. He says my name again. Not to me, to my husband. Eli stands by the men's door with his hat pressed to his chest, rubbing the pale scar across his right thumb. He knows I'm listening. I can tell because he won't look toward the third bench, the one with the split rail that catches my blue Sunday dress. I think the bishop must mean another Sarah. No, wait. There is another Sarah, but she's 62 and walks with a cane. That tiny mistake is what my mind gives me. Something foolish to hold, while every woman suddenly finds a reason to study her hands. My belly feels cold. When I whisper, Eli, he turns slowly, like I'm the one who has entered the wrong room. Behind him, his sister Martha folds a white handkerchief into smaller squares. The deacon's wife watches my face. Nobody looks surprised. That's the part I still can't set down. They know. The church knows. My husband knows. And somehow, the last person told about my body is me. I am 79 years old, and I still feel that ribbon tighten. Quick pause. My name is Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it keeps these stories alive. Tell me in the comments, who should hear news about your body first? And going further, a super chat or membership tells me these voices matter. That keeps this going. Now, back to what happened. What happened began long before that Sunday, though nobody in our district would have called it a rule. The ordning was spoken of like a fence around a good field, not there to trap you, only to keep danger out. Men carried news to the bishop. Women carried bread, babies, water, grief. Nobody sat me beneath the walnut tree and said, Sarah, your body belongs to the order before it belongs to you. I learned it from smaller things, the way Mama lowered her voice when Aunt Ruth missed 2 wash days, the way the midwife entered through the side door after dark, the way Father answered questions asked of Mother. Once, when I was 12, I heard a woman say she might be with child. Her husband cleared his throat, and she changed it to, we may have news. We. That one word told me where a woman ended. In our district, a husband could tell the ministry his wife was pregnant before he told her. That's the part I still can't set down. The rule lived in looks more than words. At Quilting Bees, women spoke freely about thread, weather, sour cherries, and whose cow had gone dry. But the room tightened whenever a girl asked how a baby began or why labor hurt. I remember Anna Lapp, 16 then, touching the red edge of a quilt block and asking her mother, how do you know? Her mother didn't scold her. She pressed Anna's finger flat and said, a good wife waits. The thimble on her middle finger had a dent like a tiny moon. I almost asked what waiting meant. My mouth even opened. Then Martha, my older sister, caught my eye and shook her head once. You learned from what happened to girls who asked twice. Fewer invitations, sharper prayers, mothers suddenly too busy to visit. Shame didn't need a raised voice. It sat beside you at supper and passed the potatoes. By the time Eli began walking me home from singing nights, I knew silence was part of being chosen. Martha prepared me for marriage 3 weeks before the wedding, while we snapped beans into a cream bowl with a blue crack down one side. She gave me 11 words. I counted them later because I thought I'd forgotten some. Be still, be kind, and don't make him feel ashamed. That was all. No names for parts of my own body. No talk of pain, choice, fear, or what I could say if I needed him to stop. Eli had been told almost as little. His cousin Samuel took him behind the harness shop and said a husband should be gentle, pray first, and not ask women foolish questions. Samuel was 23. No, 24. I always make him younger because he looked like a boy when he laughed. That was our education. One frightened woman warning another not to frighten a man, and one frightened man warning another not to admit he was frightened. We walked toward marriage carrying instructions meant to hide our ignorance from each other. And I did love Eli. I need to say that, because a story can flatten a man until he's only the worst thing he failed to understand. He brought me the smoothest peach from his father's tree and pretended it had fallen into his pocket. He fixed the loose rung on Mama's wash bench without being asked. When we rode home from Sunday singing, he kept the buggy lantern low because bright light gave me headaches, and he slowed beside the Miller farm where the road dipped near the creek. I trusted him because he noticed small discomforts. I think it was a Tuesday when he first asked to court me. No, Thursday. The bread was rising under Mama's striped towel, and Thursdays were baking days. Eli stood by the pump, pulling at his left sleeve until a thread wrapped around his finger. "I'd like to know you proper," he said. His ears turned red. Mine probably did too. We were tender with each other. We were also blind. The week before our wedding, women filled our house with useful things: 2 feather pillows, a tin flour scoop, 6 dish towels edged in green, and a brown crock that smelled faintly of vinegar. They told me how to keep yeast alive through winter and stretch chicken broth when company came. Nobody told me how to know whether my body was ready for anything. Aunt Ruth tucked dried raspberry leaves into my apron and whispered, "For later," but wouldn't say later than what. Even Mama only brushed my hair 100 strokes the night before and said marriage required patience. Her hand paused at stroke 73. I know because I was counting to keep from crying. I wanted to turn around and ask whether patience had an end. Instead, I watched a moth strike the lamp chimney again and again, making a soft tick. On the morning I married Eli, I knew how to polish a stove without streaks. I didn't know I was allowed to say no. Our first room was above his parents' summer kitchen, reached by 7 narrow stairs, leaning slightly right. The third stair from the top always cried out like a hinge, except that first night, when it stayed quiet under Eli's boot. I remember that silence more than the hymns. A kerosene lamp burned on a washstand beside a chipped basin, its flame making the flowered wallpaper seem to breathe. Outside, a horse stamped in the cold yard, and someone in the main house dropped a pan, then laughed too loudly. The room smelled of lamp oil, lye soap, and cedar shavings Eli had put beneath the bed. I wore a white cotton nightdress Martha had sewn, with one sleeve tighter because she'd cut the cloth crooked. Eli still had his suspenders on. He took them off, put them back on, then took them off again. His hands were red from the October wind. He looked at the floorboards as if they might tell him what came next. He sat on the edge of the bed, leaving a space between us wide enough for the folded quilt. "You're tired," he said. I said, "A little." Neither answer touched the thing in the room. He rubbed both palms over his knees, slowly, then faster, and I smoothed the same wrinkle in my nightdress until the cloth felt hot. The lamp hissed. Downstairs, his mother's clock struck 10, though it ran 6 minutes fast. "Samuel said," Eli began, then stopped. I waited. He said we should pray, so we knelt on the braided rug, our shoulders nearly touching, and Eli asked God to make us faithful. His voice shook on the word faithful. Mine wouldn't come out. When we stood, he gave me a small, helpless smile. I wanted to comfort him. I wanted someone to comfort me. That contradiction lived in my chest like 2 birds beating against the same window. His hand moved toward mine. I stopped breathing. He asked, "Is this all right?" But the words were so soft, I wasn't sure whether he meant my hand, the bed, the night, or the life we had entered. I nodded because nodding was what I'd been trained to do when a man was trying to be kind. He leaned closer. My shoulders locked, and my toes curled against the cold floorboards. "Sarah?" he whispered. I said, "I'm fine." I wasn't lying exactly. I didn't know there was another answer. When the closeness became painful, I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth and stared at a dark knot in the ceiling beam, shaped like an eye. Eli noticed me flinch and froze. "Did I hurt you?" he asked. I said, "It's supposed to." Neither of us knew who had taught me that. I wanted to pull away and move closer at the same time, because he was my husband and the only person who might save me from what we both believed had to happen. Afterward, Eli sat with his back against the iron bed frame and said he was sorry 3 times. The first sounded scared, the second sounded ashamed, the third was almost too quiet to hear. I told him there was nothing to be sorry for, because that was the only comfort I knew to give. My legs shook when I crossed the room to wash, and the basin water had gone so cold it made my fingers ache. I noticed a loose green thread on the quilt and began pulling it. It came farther than I expected, puckering 3 neat squares into one crooked ridge. I kept pulling. Eli reached out, then let his hand fall. "Should I get ma'am?" he asked. I said no too quickly. We lay down with our backs apart, though the bed was barely wide enough. At dawn, his mother knocked once and left coffee outside the door. The cup had a brown thumbprint in the glaze. By breakfast, everyone acted as if nothing had happened. My body didn't. For 7 weeks, I woke before sunrise with a sour taste in my mouth and blamed the coffee. I missed 1 monthly bleeding, then another, though I didn't understand what the missing meant. Nobody had explained that part in plain words. Eli noticed before I did because his mother counted the rags left soaking in the covered pail behind the wash house. "That is the fact. My mother-in-law counted them," told Eli, and Eli went to Bishop Miller before speaking to me. He wasn't cruel. He was following the path laid out for him. First the household head, then the ministry, then the woman whose body carried the news. At Sunday meeting, the bishop announced that our family would grow by spring, so the district could plan work, meals, and help. I learned I was pregnant from a man standing 12 feet away, while my husband stared at his hat brim. The church knew before I did. Almost everyone did. Neither of us understood that pregnancy could be confirmed privately, that a woman could be spoken to first, or that fear deserved an answer before duty made a public claim. I didn't know pain was information, not a test of goodness. I didn't know a husband could pause, ask again, or hear silence as something other than obedience. Eli wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. He'd been taught gentleness meant lowering his voice, not waiting for a clear answer, and leadership meant carrying news upward before carrying it across the table to his wife. Years later, I learned one thing: a yes given from fear isn't the same as a yes chosen. I didn't have those words then, neither did he. One sentence like that could have changed our first night, that Sunday announcement, and perhaps the way I lived inside my skin for the next 40 years. But nobody had said it to us, and by the time somebody did, grief had learned the shape of every room in our house. I learned to leave my body without leaving the room. I'd count fence posts through the bedroom window, or recite the order of jars in the cellar: beans, peaches, pickles, apple butter, until whatever was happening felt far away. By the time our first child was born, I could fold a towel while someone spoke to me and hear almost none of it. I would wake before Eli, sweep the kitchen with the corn broom, and stand by the east window until feeling returned to my hands. That became my little system. I learned to smile at breakfast, nod in meeting, and save my real breath for the barn. Sometimes I'd sit behind the hay bales with a tin cup of water and pretend I'd gone there for the cat. The cat rarely came. Apparently even she had boundaries, though I didn't know that word yet. Eli thought I liked quiet mornings. I did. I also needed them to remember I was still in there. The pattern lasted through babies, planting seasons, funerals, and winters when ice formed inside the upstairs glass. Eli became more careful with age, though neither of us knew how to talk about why. He'd ask, "You tired?" And I'd say, "A bit," and that stood in for whole pages we couldn't read. I learned to make myself useful when I felt trapped. I scrubbed the milk pans twice. I mended socks that didn't need mending. I kneaded bread so hard my wrists ached, because dough was one thing that changed when I pressed it. That's the part I still can't set down. People praised me for being steady during the years I was disappearing. At church suppers, older women touched my arm and called me a good wife. I would look at the grease shining on the gravy and wonder whether goodness was supposed to feel so much like being gone. I first understood other women were carrying the same silence during a quilting bee at Lena's house. Snow was packed against the north wall, and the stove door had a bent latch that clicked every few minutes. Anna sat across from me, stitching tiny black diamonds into a wedding quilt. Her hand slipped, and the needle went deep into her thumb. She watched the blood rise without moving. Lena said, "You all right?" Anna wrapped the thumb in her apron and answered, "It passes." 3 words. But she wasn't talking about the needle. I knew it from the way Lena stopped rocking her foot, and the way Martha stared down at a yellow square she'd already sewn crooked. I almost said, "Me too." My lips formed the M. Then someone poured coffee, and the cups knocked together like little bells. We all heard the confession that never came. That was the community's best-kept secret. Each woman thought she was the only one. Together. Anna's story reached me in pieces. Her husband, Daniel, was gentle in daylight and lost in the dark, just as Eli had been, and Anna believed fear was something a wife swallowed before prayer. One wash day, with steam coating the windows, she whispered that she'd slept on the pantry floor for 3 nights because the door had a bolt. "Did he strike you?" Martha asked. Anna shook her head. "No, he asks." Then she folded a wet sheet into fourths and would say no more. A month later, her mother began sitting beside her at every gathering. Questions were redirected toward gratitude. Doubt was called weariness. Women who spoke too close to the truth were given more work, more prayer, and less time alone with one another. Nobody had to plan it. The silence had been handed down so long, it knew how to defend itself. By our 3rd year of marriage, I no longer wondered whether something was wrong with me. I simply assumed womanhood was the thing that hurt. 4 decades later, after Eli died and I had left the district to live near my youngest daughter, I found the first word that named any of it. I was 71, sitting in a clinic waiting room with a paper cup of water balanced on my knee. The cup had a blue wave printed around it, and one drop kept sliding down the side onto my thumb. On the wall was a plain poster with 2 circles. One circle said, "Freely chosen." The other said, "Without fear." Where they crossed, in dark letters, was the word consent. My chest gave one hard jump, then another. I couldn't swallow. A young counselor named May came through the door and called my name, but I stayed seated because the room had tilted. I pointed at the poster and asked, "Is that for married people too?" She didn't laugh. She pulled a chair close and said, "Especially then." I wasn't angry. Not first. I was sad, in a way that made my bones feel hollow. Sad for the girl in the tight white sleeve who thought pain proved she was good. I pictured her staring at the knot in the ceiling beam, trying to protect the young man beside her from his own shame. Eli and I had both been prisoners of the same locked room, though the lock sat heavier on my side. That doesn't erase what happened. It explains why neither of us reached for the key. May drew a line on a sheet of paper and wrote, "You can change your mind at any point." I stared until the words blurred. Any point. Not before marriage only. Not before the lamp went out. Any point. That's the part I still can't set down. A sentence simple enough for a child had been kept from me until I had grandchildren older than I was on my wedding night. What I grieved most wasn't only the pain. It was the other life hidden inside the same life, the one where Eli and I might have learned each other slowly, where tenderness didn't have to guess, where my body wasn't treated like news to be carried past me. I tried explaining this to a woman at the bus stop once. She wore purple gloves and smelled like peppermint gum. "Why didn't you just tell him?" she asked. She wasn't cruel. She simply came from a world where the word just could fit inside that sentence. I said, "I didn't know there was a thing to tell." She nodded, but her eyes had already moved toward the arriving bus. That's the loneliness of leaving. The people inside think you've betrayed them, and the people outside think freedom was always sitting beside you, bright as a red exit sign. I went home and sat on my daughter's back step until the porch light came on, holding my bus ticket between two fingers, because it was the only thing in that new world I knew how to name. Still, I won't lie about what I miss. I miss horses breathing in the cold before dawn, their backs silver with frost while the harness chains gave one soft clink in the dark. Eli used to warm the bit inside his coat before placing it in the mare's mouth. That kindness was real. I miss bread from a wood oven, the bottom crust dusted with ash, and the way Mama tapped each loaf with one bent knuckle to hear whether it was done. She'd tear off the heel while it was still too hot, and press butter into it until it ran over her thumb. And I miss my grandmother's hands during prayer, brown spots over the knuckles, one finger curved from an old break, resting open on her black apron. She believed stillness could hold a family together. Sometimes it did. Those are gifts. Work done well, food shared before anyone asked. The sound of people arriving through snow because no one should bury a child alone. I carry all of that, and I carry the harm too. Silence dressed up as holiness. 5 words. Both things fit in the same house, though they never sit easily at the same table. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. I don't need to solve that anymore. These days, I bake bread with my granddaughter, and when she asks a question, I answer the question she actually asked. Even when my face gets hot. Especially then. I still keep one of Eli's cedar shavings in a small envelope inside my Bible, because he was more than what he didn't know. The system failed us both, but my body paid the bill. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. If you learned obedience before you learned choice, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are not dirty for needing words nobody gave you. You are not cruel for naming what hurt. You are not broken because your body remembers before your mind does. Maybe you still freeze when someone asks a simple question. Maybe you laugh at the wrong moment, or clean the same counter twice, or feel guilty when you close a door. Those things made sense once. They helped you get through. You don't have to hate the people you came from in order to tell the truth about what happened there. To the one still inside, keeping your questions folded small in an apron pocket, I see you. To the one who left and misses the smell of rain on a buggy road, I see you. To the one thinking about leaving, then feeling sick with guilt before breakfast, I see you. To the one who's married and only now realizing that silence wasn't the same as peace, I see you. To the one who recognized herself 3 minutes ago and hasn't moved since, breathe. You're allowed to take your time. Nobody gets to rush your knowing, not even the people who mean well. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment, tell me what you felt listening to this, or tell me the sentence you wish someone had given you sooner. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, but I'm getting closer, one plain word at a time. Subscribe to Rebecca Amish Home if you want to stay for those stories, because this is where we name what silence tried to bury without throwing away every tender thing that came before it. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. I spent most of my life believing my body belonged last in every room. I know better now. So should you. Your body was always yours, even when nobody said it.